Recent cyber attacks on marital affairs website Ashley Madison and Sony Pictures showed how companies and leaders could be even more damaged by leaks of personal memos and profiles than the loss of money. Boards have been shaken up by the idea that their emails or personal affairs could turn up on the dark web. Here at the FT's European Cybersecurity Summit in London, companies, banks and regulators have gathered to ask one question: what can boards do about the threat of attack?
Companies need to prepare for cyber attacks by having really clear strategy and policy. They need to start from the premise of what are the bad guys going to want from us? What's my crown jewels? What's my critical data? Then they need to extend that through the whole culture of the business. It starts with the board and it flows right the way through to IT, right across the whole company. But it's about risk management, it's about making it into the DNA of our risk management systems, and then flowing that right through and putting real policies, quantifiable measurements and processes in place that we can track, we can look at, we can monitor, and then we can take whatever actions are needed.
I think companies can really improve their preparedness for cyber attacks by building a culture of readiness, responsiveness, and reinvention. And that really is much more than a paper process. It's management, it's technologists, and it's operational people who are working together to really build something that's sustainable for the company.
Experts agree that companies now need to assume the attackers are on the inside. Scary as that sounds, it means every company needs to come up with a plan of how they will cope in case of attack.
Well, when you're a CEO and you learn that you have a breach, you've got to ask a lot of questions. Where are we at? Are we still in the fog of war? What do we know right now? And what you do really depends on the industry you're in and the consequence of the breach. So there is no one formula that fits all. It's a risk-based decision. You have to sit down. But what I always say is make sure you understand what's fact from fiction and rumor mill. You've got to make sure, are we sure about this? What do we know? And then what are we doing about it? Those are the questions you're going to want to ask.
We need to know what happened before we communicate too much. So just as bad as not disclosing early on that we've had an attack, almost worse is disclosing early on when we don't know what the facts are and we don't know how much data has been compromised, and we're therefore at risk of making, frankly, stupid comments about what we think really happened because we're guessing.
Once the immediate fallout from a hack has passed, companies have to decide who to hold responsible for an attack. Do they fire a chief executive or a chief information security officer? Or do they decide that attacks are now so widespread that getting hit really isn't anyone's fault?
I don't necessarily think that firing leaders is a way of responding to cyber attacks. There's an interesting study that one of the insurance companies puts out that shows that most CEOs manage risks to their enterprise based on their past experiences. We have to grow a generation of enterprise leaders who've had their tests by fire, if you will, in cyber, that they're going to have events, they're going to fail, they're not going to go well. Their ability to learn and reinvent themselves in the face of that, that's going to become a new CEO skill.
The unfortunate reality right now is that if you're breached and you know it, for whatever reason, you're deemed irresponsible rather than a victim of a crime. We have got to, as a world community, start looking at the attackers doing this and stop blaming the victims for having a breach.
From the biggest banks to the smallest startups, everyone now has to have a plan in case of cyber attack. Law enforcement agencies and regulators are helping by offering more support and guidelines. But for now, there are few clear-cut rules and many companies have to make it on their own. Hannah Kuchler, Financial Times, London.